Christianity starts to offer kings a better idea of what it is to be a king. Firstly, there's an association it offers with the Roman Empire, Old Testament kings, and then on top of that, it starts to help them think about what it is to be a king. So through Christianity, and especially Old Testament examples of kings, it tells kings, what is it to be a good king? You must stand up for the faith, for a start. You must look after the clergy. You must be charitable. You must be moral. You must look after the poor. You must be honest. You must show humility despite being a person in power. You should be a lawmaker. You should enforce the laws, and you should be under the laws. You mustn't act in an arbitrary way. You are under God and the law, and that's a fundamental idea.
As early as then?
As certainly, I mean, it's an idea which you start to see in the early law codes. I mean, the first law code is given by Ethelbert in 597. It's the first text in Anglo-Saxon, and it doesn't look very Christian because, I mean, well, apart from the fact that it protects the church and the property of the church, it's still very much the first phrase that comes to mind is Latin, lex talionis, the law of retaliation, and it's compensation for injury as much as death. So it's not like we are going to punish you by putting you in prison. It's a private matter of revenge. But as the law codes develop, and Ina and Alfred and so on, they start explicitly to draw from Christian ideals, from the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, the golden maxim of Christ that you should love your God and love your neighbour, ideas from the early Christian community in the Acts of the Apostles. So they enforce that people should not work on a Sunday. It's very socially progressive legislation, in a sense, going back all that time, that churches should be places of sanctuary, which remains the law of England until 1623, 1624, that the poor should be provided for in society, that there shouldn't be harsh punishments for trivial crimes. But also, I mean, this idea that kings are under God and the law is very much voiced by the Venerable Bede, the great monk scholar of Jarrow Monk Wearmouth, who was writing in the early part of the 8th century, that was from the 700s. The king is under God and the law. And this idea of the king being under God and the law recurs again and again throughout our history. And it's a cornerstone of the idea of constitutional government. The government must obey the law.
I'm very keen to get into the law side of things. It's particularly since, I don't know if you picked up from the assisted dying bill and the conversations around that earlier this year. And I heard progressives, notably, I remember Lewis Goodall, who of the news agencies, a commentator, and he really seemed to take umbrage with the idea that anyone draw from their faith, their Christianity, when deciding about whether to vote in favour or against the law. And I just thought to myself, does he have any idea where common law comes from? Like, does he not understand? And as you write in your book, that really until the 1990s, we accepted perfectly reasonably that common law was born out of Christianity. But before we come to that, one question on the relationship between the elites and the people. So as you paint the picture there was, after the Romans left, you have a sort of folkish Christianity that remains, and then you also have the elites that remain, that are, some of whom are Christian, and then you have Augustine targeting elites. And I'm quite interested in relating to the common law is that we think of it in our country, law coming from the ground up. And that's kind of the difference between Britain and Europe, Roman law and common law in a sense, but also the culture of that, top down versus bottom up. And I'm just curious, in that period, is Christianity coming from the people, or is it coming top down? And it sounds like a bit of both, but I kind of wanted to understand what was the prevalence of either, which was having more of an impact?
I find it very hard to unravel, and I mean, I'm not the only person, certainly, how the dynamics of conversion worked. And I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there is certainly a top-down element to it. I mean, once an elite starts doing something, the immediate followers start doing something, and then it percolates down in society. And there were certainly preaching campaigns, and it wasn't a one-way street. I mean, elites converted and then lapsed. And I think, I mean, it seems to me there must have been an attraction at every level of society to the new faith. I mean, partly because it had a sense of grandeur, but also I think because of this, not just the spiritual, but also the social offerings. I mean, if you have a law code which protects people from working on the Sabbath day, protects people from kings acting in an arbitrary fashion, then there must be an attraction to that. But I think it's going to be a mixture of elite movement from the ground upwards, movement from preaching campaigns, and also, I mean, the way that the faith is presented. I mean, this idea that old shrines shouldn't be destroyed, but in themselves converted.
As in, like, old pagan traditions should be converted.
Yes, the pagan tradition should be converted so that people can be brought along with them. So, well, it's particularly not so much the traditions as such, but places. Old pagan shrines are turned into Christian places in certain circumstances. But Christianity offers new places of worship, and I mean, new places that offer that connection to the holy. Especially with the idea of sainthood and the sanctity of the saints and the sanctity of the presence of the saints' relics and body, which have such a profound impact on the development of the English landscape and the way that we relate to the landscape. So, as I say, because it's a time in history where it's very difficult to sort of.
It's a bit nebulous.
Yes, it is a bit nebulous.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.